Well, welcome back, everyone. And I'm Tears of Forrester, and I have with me the lovely Sheila Pye. And I'm so excited to have her. And she has such a unique story, and I'm excited to hear it. And I'm excited for you all to hear it as well. So, Sheila, tell us more about yourself, your journey, and kind of what you do and how you got there. The steps that got you to where you are now.
Oh, thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for everybody who's listening and watching now and later. Grateful that you're making this time for yourself, that you're honoring yourself this way. So I appreciate the effort to show up. Um, I'm a relationship, business, and life coach, and I run retreats, and I do that in groups, and I do it online and in person. I do individuals and couples, but I also coach and do self-paced courses online and programs. But I think my focus has always really been on mindful self-care and on shifting from a space of overwhelm and frustration of disconnection to a space of fulfillment, a space of freedom, both within and without. And so that uh, you're going to hear that probably throughout everything that I talk about, and this belief that I have. I believe in presence over perfection. I believe that presence is where we're going to open to all the possibilities. And so my job is really to provide tools, insights, and supports for really surprisingly simple, practical, and doable, really tiny shifts that make big change towards a thriving life and a thriving you around what your values and vision and voice really mean to you. And so looking back, I have seen how all the moments of my life have really led me to the work that I do. And my work is directly out of my life. I think you're going to hear that as we talk as well. But I think it really started when I used to teach middle school. I used to teach writing and math in middle school. And if anybody has ever struggled with reading or writing or ever struggled with math, I mean, a lot of adults who still think that they're not smart because they were never good at math. And it's a real opportunity. It was an incredible opportunity for me to work with self-talk and story work. And I got into nonviolent communication through my work in the classroom. I had incredible shifts within one class period. And then I ended up using that throughout all of my teaching career. And then when I became a mother, I lost a baby, and then I had a baby. And through all the shame of that, the struggle, the secrecy around it, the silence around loss, the silence around becoming a mother, around relationships, moving from relationship with child, without child to having a child, and the community that I did not feel, the support for community that I did not feel, led me to become a birth art worker, a story worker, birth story worker. I started working with mothers and families, but originally I started it as a community because I longed for community. I longed for what I called a living family. So my business started as a community for other mothers and other families. And as I started working with mothers and families, I call it a couch in the kitchen feel. I had a couch in the kitchen, and I would have a lot of potlucks, a lot of play dates, a lot of time with mothers, and I would see the anxiety, I would see the overwhelm, I would see the struggle. I would hear about these dreams sitting on a shelf gathering dust. And so as I got to have an infant as opposed to a newborn with my first, I really got more into parenting, more into self-care, more into relationships, more into dads. I started coaching couples more. I got trained in hand-in-hand parenting, both for my personal self and for my professional self. And I started working more with parents. And as I started to do that, being a stay-at-home mom influenced my work, being a work-at-home mom influenced my work, and then eventually becoming a work outside of the home mom. I've been all of those things, and really watching that original nonviolent communication work and the original self-care work that I was doing and seeing it transform into something that I call mindful communication, and to witness how mindful self-care comes alive in my own life and in my work with women and couples has been truly incredible to this point where, after creating Nurturing You, the book and the course and the work and mindful communication all around mindful self-care, I ended up getting I got asked for another teaching job, and I ended up having a whole new level of understanding of my own work. And I'm hoping that through our interview, I'll get to share some of how, I, through life circumstances, came to live my work at a much deeper level and bring it forth in an even new way that I call wild devotion, which is much more focused on desire and longing, on freedom, on connection in another way. So that's kind of the big scope of things. But I think you can hear how my whole life I've just been having experiences, gathering insights, doing a lot of research. I take a lot in and then sharing it with people. It's definitely what a living family is about. It's what my work personally is about.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. But yeah, it's crazy how all these life circumstances that we don't always ask for kind of lead us down this path of greater understanding and a deeper appreciation for ourselves, and then to realize, like, oh, I can help others. I'm not the only one struggling with those things, especially infertility and miscarriage. And I think they're just still, I think there's a lot of talk about them, but it's still a huge kind of taboo in our culture. And so
yeah, that and hormones too. I'm looking to get to take my work more to women experiencing perimenopause and all the secrecy around that. It's so much. I'd like to do more work with teens and the secrecy around knowing your own cycles and feeling empowered in your own body versus a lot of messages that they're getting at this time.
right.
So I really like to work with the full range, and I think everything that you're talking about is so applicable, whether you're 16 or 60.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, and there will probably be multiple that you can think of, but a time where you kind of lost your vision. It was a time of, okay, what am I doing? Where am I going? And what did you do to get back to a place of feeling like you had purpose again?
That's so awesome. Recently as in like a year and a half ago, feels like a lifetime ago, but recently there has been a major shift in my life and myself, in my work, and it's really what Wild Devotion is coming out of. So while my original work was more mindful self-care, mindful communication, mindful shift, and then really as I started to own these other pieces of myself, Wild Devotion came out, and all of that shift really occurred because about a year and a half ago, I had like a major crisis in my partnership where, we've been together over 15 years at that point, and we were really on autopilot in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And there had been a lot that had happened with the loss, a lot that I had not processed myself. And so I, now looking back, and even in the time period, that was part of what was so healing, was being able myself to go back into these times in my life where I really did not have the permission from myself. I did not necessarily have the skills of that deep of work, but I was able to then, at this point in my life, having gone through my business, look back at myself before loss, during loss, after loss, with my first child, all through postpartum, and then having my second, which was a whole other layer of, there are definitely some very hard and almost traumatic experiences as a mother. I believe we all have traumatic experiences. And so part of my birth work that inspires all my work now is to really capture those. And so this was a moment where I got to use this breakdown of my old relationship. And we did actually end up having a ending ceremony together during a full moon ritual where we kind of released and let go of all of that we were. And it wasn't like we knew where we were really going. And so that vision of who I was and what my partnership was and what my business is and how I'm going to show up in the world, just even as a human, was really all called into question in a major way. And it wasn't something necessarily expected, but I can see on the other side of it now how it was always going to happen. And really what was happening was that I was becoming more and more myself as I started to do my own work. And I rid myself of these layers of story. My story and my partner's story and our story together really came to a head of what is the story we're going to tell. And as I started questioning my own story for myself, it really came up against my partner, and we started working with our own baggage, like this, all this, just really for me to own what the story actually was, as opposed to his story about what had happened and his story about me, or my story about me and my story about what had happened. Really giving myself an open space. I released a lot of fear. I no longer fear my relationship ending. I no longer fear what would happen, and that, I talk about it pretty calmly at this time. I was devastated.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I did not know whether we were going to make it or not,
Yeah.
What I didn't know is that we were going to make it, and we were way better than we ever were. Right. I mean, we're in an entirely different relationship than we ever were, partially because we chose to end what we had in ritual, right? And to honor what we had and honor who we had been, and then step into something new together. So I think that, that loss of vision really was representative of the loss of who I was and all the layers of story that I had been living with, story that was not mine, beliefs that were not mine, actions that were coming out of those beliefs and thoughts that were not mine, and or that I had been cultivating and did not want to grow any longer. And so I really did the work with my partner and within myself. I ended up finding out much more deeply what my work is really about, and as if I thought I knew, but there's so much more, and I'm sure that it'll happen again, because some of the beauty of my work to me is that it's so simple. It's always going to be very useful. It's always going to have both simplicity for when I'm so overwhelmed I can only just take the next breath, and a real depth, a very tangible depth that allows me and other people, shockingly, to shift forward in ways that are astounding, right? So when I did my mindful self-care work, when I did my nurturing you work, when I did my mindful communication work, and I opened to this idea of wild devotion, this honoring of my own desire and dream and becoming, this whole relationship opened up before me. My partner's life for himself opened up before him, and it's just been an amazing unfolding of all that was beyond possibility to me before.
That's beautiful. I love that. And taking care of yourself, like we all have a pile of rags. And and as women, I think we tend to take other people's rags and be like, oh, I can help you with that. I can, like, oh, you don't feel bad, don't feel sorry, or let me control your emotions for you, and let me help you, and then we forget about our pile of rags that is sitting there, and a lot of times, it comes to this point of like, either I can go forward like this and probably die a lot earlier than I would if I didn't take care of myself.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, learning to really take care of yourself, that's brave, brave of both of you to go through that. So thank you
Yeah,
for
I think
sharing.
that, that was always something that I could see for myself and I could see in the work that I had done previously. But this level of, and mindful self care has always been distinguished for me from what people normally talk of as self care. It's not massages,
Yeah.
nature should
Yeah.
be. It really is about, do you care about yourself or do
Mm-hmm.
you not? Do your
Mm-hmm.
actions show that you care about yourself or do they not? Do your thoughts show that you care about yourself or do they not? And so all of that, that's straight out of my middle school work when I had kids that are like, I'm dumb, I'm never going to
Yeah.
be, that whole shift to a kid who's coming to me purposefully trying the absolute hardest thing that she can, versus a kid, the same girl coming to me at the beginning of the year, like, I won't be doing a thing. I'm just letting you know. Like that difference between, you know, and I guess like here's what I'm noticing as well is that with the women that I work with, especially, they know that they're getting enough messages that they're supposed to be taking care of themselves, and they know that self-care matters, and they know that self-care is not knowing is a process, but they know intellectually that self-care is not selfish and that it benefits people around them. But what is not so known confidently in the body is just, how do I do that? How do I actually mindfully
Mm-hmm.
shift from where I am and what I feel right now to this next thing? I can't even deal with the bigness of it.
Yeah.
um, so really making it very simple, very practical, very doable, and living that myself, going from something so big and scary to something that is absolutely astounding is been phenomenal that it happens so small, so many small steps.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of things do to help people kind of, really start to work on their self-care? Because, like you said, like self-care isn't always getting a massage or getting your hair done. That's, personal hygiene in a way.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, the self-care is hard, and people don't want to do it because they know they have to go to a dark place to get better. And
Yeah.
so what do you do to help people kind of start that journey?
Um, I think before I even begin with somebody, I hope that people sense, and I know that people who work with me come out with that sense. I wholeheartedly believe in people and their ability to heal themselves, to do this work. Not everybody's willing to, but if you are willing and you are open to being guided, there is so much possibility. And so part of it, just even from the first moment that I start working with somebody, is for me to hold belief for them, for me to hold the vision for them,
Mm-hmm.
because even though they might have a vision, it's because, just like I was in my own space of darkness, it's hard to hold it for yourself. And it's in such a disorienting space, it's hard to feel the ground. And so I really hold that vision, that ground for people. And I think just communicating that from the first outset allows people to do some incredibly hard work with me. And so one of the first things that we talk about is making space. A lot of my work is around creating rituals, and a lot behind that is around making space for ourselves. Taking up space is absolutely triggering for many people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's at whatever level, even big name people feel nervous and anxious about taking up space, right? Shame is not is for all humans. It's a human feeling. And so making space and doing the work around that actually gets people warmed up and ready to do the work of listening in, of connecting within. That exhale allows us to then take in the inhale. And then from there, it's really about building a lot of trust in themselves. We do some work together. They take inspired actions from that work, and then it's about feeding feeding that feeling, feeding that dream with devotion, with support, with learning. People learn themselves. That's really my goal. I do not position myself as an expert. I do not think of myself as an expert, because everyone is, to me, their only expert in themselves, right? And I believe that people are capable of figuring it out. And I am very skilled at helping people do that. And so my job is to trust that you know yourself, trust that you can connect to yourself, trust that you have wisdom inside, trust that you are going to find clarity and understanding about your own dreams and desires. And then I do a lot of reflecting, of connecting, of clarifying, of setting steps forward and holding that container so that when people are ready, they start sharing and reflecting back to other people, and within themselves, they start to realize that their creativity has value, that they are worthy, and that starts to shift everything.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely creating that space. And I think that's hard for people because it's an intimacy issue.
Mm-hmm.
They're, afraid of themselves almost.
Yeah.
What do you think has been apart from that, like what kind of inspiring stories have you seen along the way? I'm sure you get a lot of people who kind of have, like, maybe not all last resort, but probably some who like, I don't know what to do anymore.
Yeah.
And how have you seen some people like turn around, 360?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite, just thinking about it, one of my favorite examples is both personal and professional. I have a friend, when I started out with Nurturing You work, she was in one of my circles, and then we started doing, so from that work on mindful self-care, we started doing couples work, and I thought that has been some of the most amazing work to hear her partner say. I mean, to me, it's funny. Like, he says that I spoiled them for a therapist. That they can't find a therapist because he really felt heard and felt supported through that. And so, for me to be able to work with women and then with couples is really the inspiration behind Wild Devotion, is to feel fluidity between those roles that we play, and as woman, as partner, as business owner, those places in ourselves are not always overlapping, and sometimes are overwhelmingly overlapping. And so she's a great example of somebody who started with herself, and then we moved into couples work. And then the biggest excitement for me is seeing her doing her own business in such a deep, meaningful way right now, and the confidence that she has to show up, and the love that she's getting back, and the way that she has moved through some really challenging situations lately, because we happen to become very close friends. I mean, she's a great example of somebody who I think is willing to do the work and just sees how many areas of life are shifted. And so I feel really blessed to get to know her and to be able to witness all the ways in which she has grown from that original work with herself.
Yeah. Very cool. So what do you do, or what do you help people with? So you personally, and then, helping others, what do you do to kind of restore yourself? What kinds of things you're talking about self-care, but what kind of things do you do personally to kind of get to that place of clarity again?
Yeah, for me, connection is such a deep value. And that connection with myself, connection to my breath, connection to community. I have such a wonderful sisterhood that I've cultivated. And I draw upon that. Obviously, most of the time when we're feeling off, it's a moment of disconnection. And so I really feed that. I will have practices that feed that. I like visuals. So I have visuals around my room that I'm looking at right now of there are images and mantras. So there's simple words and images that call to me. So I'll use those. I will definitely use my breath. I have a mindful self-care practice of making myself tea. To me, mindful self-care isn't about doing a whole lot more. It's really about doing everything that we do with mindfulness and with love. And so, if I'm really in a hard place, then And even if I'm not, and I'm trying to go to a great place, I really rely on those mindful self-care rituals of my tea, of journaling, of movement, of connecting with people that I love, who are very supportive of me, who hold space for my big vision and all that I'm becoming. Those things feed me. And I do things like coloring. I like to be outside. There's really very simple things, but I also will make attempts to watch all of my talk. That probably is the biggest thing that I do. I love words, I love story, and I love story work. And so I'm always doing that with myself. And once you know your own stories, you become really good at seeing where the BS is and where the actual line is. And I love to play with that. So I do a lot of that work with myself.
Yeah. Where do you find yourself getting stuck, and where have you seen other people kind of get stuck, and those triggers, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's always astounding to me, and I don't know why, but it hasn't really stopped. But I originally created, all of my work is work that I do personally. All my work that I do professionally is personally important to me. And but I'm always astounded when I bring it to other people that they're like, hey, that's really useful. Because to me it's so personal. But these things are very universal. There's shame that we're all working with, and there is overwhelm that we're all working with. There's a lack of empathy that we're all living around. And so those trigger points of I'm not feeling appreciated, and I'm not feeling heard, and I'm not even sure that I'm wanted. These stories are universal in some ways, although everybody has their own words to it.
Mm-hmm.
Those pain points of not, when we're moving through our day, those painful moments of this is not my joy, this is not feeling connected, this is not inspired, this feeling of I'm just going through these motions. So stuck can feel like very devastating, but stuck can also just feel like some of the people that I'm working with have a lot of skill to maintain and sustain through devastating moments, but what they're not feeling unstuck about is let me get out of this pattern, let me get out of this story, how do I get out of this story? And so whatever the story is, that's the work that I do, is how do you uproot all these beliefs, all these stories, these thoughts that are not serving you? How do you cultivate, how do you plant and really tend to your own garden of joy and dreams and everything that has meaning to you? Purpose is something that is incredibly valuable, and dream is something that people tend to undervalue. To me, those dreams and purposes are very connected, and creativity is this life force that is universally useful. And I don't think it's about being an artist or a painter necessarily. I really think it is how we create the lives that we live, and we all have power to create the lives that we live. And so the work that I do is, what story do you want to tell about your life, and how can you start living the story that you would like to be telling? Right. That's a real shift that I work with many people on. And it's always astounding that when I do my work, that other women, other men, other couples are able to fully step into their worth and their voice and their being. Working with people who are struggling, and then cultivating that connection, how powerful it is.
Yeah. Owning your story, and then learning to find your value along the way and your worth in that. Yeah, it's powerful. And I think a lot of, especially women and a lot of men, don't really understand what that even means. And so I think it's so important to go on the journey for each and every person, to really live out their creativity and what that means for them, and to live out their unique story in that way. So what would you tell someone who's watching this and is going through their own journey right now,
Mhm.
and is afraid to start some hard work, afraid to start something creative, afraid to start or to even restart, and they're in this place of stuck? What would you tell from your personal journey,
Mm.
someone in that place?
Yeah, sometimes we're stuck at the outset because we're feeling so doubtful, and sometimes we're stuck at the outset because we're feeling so fearful of what we know to be true, right? That greatness that is right there that we're afraid of. Um, so whether you're in a place of, I'm not feeling good enough, or this is too good, I don't deserve it. Either one of those places, the thing I always ask people to consider in any moment is whether you're willing. Are you willing to take one mindful breath? Just one mindful breath. Because if you are willing, and it's a yes, no question, either you are
Mm-hmm.
or you aren't. And if you aren't, there's no judgment. It's really simply to see, are you willing or are you not? Are you open or are you closed? If you're not willing to take one mindful breath, you're not really connecting to the creativity inside of you. So anything that you're going to try is going to feel very limited. If you are willing to take mindful breath, then you can start feeling that flow and connection. And if you aren't willing and yet you sit with that unwillingness, there comes the opportunity to hear what story you're telling yourself, to hear what kind of myths you're living inside of, what kind of beliefs are holding you from this thing that's right there, that is yours. It is your life force. It is your creativity. So that willingness, are you willing to take one mindful breath, is something that's really powerful for me personally. And I bring it to everybody that I work with, because at the base level, that's the only question that there is. Whether you think it's possible or you don't think it's possible, whether you can or can't do the work, it doesn't really matter. It's a question at the very base level, as either you're willing or you're not. And there's something really powerful with being able to own that you're not willing and why that is, and to be able to own that you are willing and why that is. And then when you move forward, it feels very different. And
Mm-hmm.
the second thing I would say is to, with that, really bring up your courage. And the courage is simply to be present. The courage to be present. Because I really do believe in presence and not perfection. I don't think that perfection is something that we should be striving for. I find it very limiting. Any creative knows that perfectionism is killing, although a lot of us have the tendency.
Mm-hmm.
We can see that limitation does foster creativity, but too much limitation, which is driven by perfectionism, limitation that is amorphous, it is abstract, it's not even clear because it's out of story, right? It's not even
Mm-hmm.
true. That
Yeah.
is so killing. That the courage to be present is very real. The courage to be present with what you are feeling, with what you are thinking, with what you are needing, with what is around you, with what is coming forth out of you, just to be courageous enough
Mm-hmm.
to be present with the gift that you're given in the moment is so precious. And I think that the more we practice that, right, the more we are in that present moment, then we are able to listen and we are able to work within our own self to clear whatever blocks are in the way. And if you are not even feeling blocked, then the courage to be present, if nothing else, will simply unleash that creativity within
Mm-hmm.
you, right? To
Yeah.
go deeply into that groove. I think if anybody has ever, whether you think of yourself as a creative or artist or not, there's always that moment in your life where you felt just so in sync with what was happening, right? And that's that idea that wherever you are at, whether you're stoked to start or whether you're stuck in starting, that you can be willing and be courageous, be present and be with your breath, present in your breath, right? And that's all you
Mm-hmm.
really need to start with. You don't have to go create a big masterpiece. You don't have to have everything set up in your studio the right way. There is no right way to do creativity. You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to be a painter or a writer, any one thing. Either you're willing or you're not. And are you willing to be courageous and show up to this one breath in this one moment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and being present is that's really important to the work that I do, helping being outside. I think being in the elements and hiking and climbing and stuff like that, you have to be so present. You
Mhm.
have no time to think of other things or what you're worrying about or what your hair looks like or, anything really. And so just having that, being really present, your mind is finally able to breathe.
Yeah.
And also through the arts as well. That kinesthetic kind of movement of the body in both those ways, I think it forces you to be present, and I really think that's super important. Yeah, to really get to that place of willingness is to be present.
Mhm.
um, Before two things, before we close out, one, if there's anything that's on your heart that you want to close out with, and then your free gift, you can go ahead and share that after or before, either way.
Well, I did actually want to share one last thing because I just want to acknowledge that the courage that I'm talking about it matters. The courage to just breathe mindfully once, the courage to be present is that is the work, and that you are so precious just for existing, simply for being. And that feeling of connection that you can get from caring for yourself, valuing your creativity and your being is impactful beyond you. And so I hope that people who are listening, whether you are in business and your creativity is feeding your business, or whether you are not in business, your creativity is feeding your life, that um, I hope that people who are listening can hear. I hope that you can hear that you matter and that these efforts matter, because it's not only about you. The more that you show up in the world, that to me, that is how the world changes, is by each one of us listening in and showing up as authentically as we possibly can. And that is courageous work.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you do the work of making 2 minutes to just sit and color in a mandala, or write down a phrase that's been on your mind, or think about how you're going to arrange your studio or what you're going to do when you get time, like just realizing that matters, that effort matters, and that you matter enough, and that it also is well beyond you, right? That it matters so much for reasons well beyond you. And I hope
Mm-hmm.
that every effort that comes from this video is just vibrating, resonating out there in the world, rippling, as I know that it will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And as
awesome.
far as the free gift goes, if you go to my website, sheilapai.com, and Pai is Pai, there's my Mindful Shift series, which is a free series, and it really walks people through everything that I talked about making space, about getting clear, about connecting with your desires and shifting, what that shift actually feels like, how to do it. And so there's that 10-day email series that is on my website. And there's through the emails that I send, if you sign up for these, but if you also sign up for my email list, that's where I get into a lot of the more personal details of how I actually apply this in my relationship, in my business, in my life. And so if you're interested in some of the more personal background details of some of the stories that I shared, or there's a big, huge shift coming up. So there's lots of personal details coming up, but especially about my relationship, which is a lot of what I'll be sharing over the coming year as I do more wild devotion work with women and couples. I really encourage you to get on my email list and get those emails, and definitely take the time to sign up for this Mindful Shift series, and just notice what is possible just with a little effort.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila, for taking time out of your afternoon to be interviewed with me. I've really, really loved our time together. So I just wanted to say thank you so much.
I'm so grateful. Thank you for reaching out, for putting this together. It's work that matters. So I'm really appreciative that you're willing to do it, because it is work. And I'm thankful again to everybody who's showing up, just for listening. I know that whether you write anything down or think you're doing anything, I know it's going to actually go into your heart and come out as love for other people. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you